here today with Kristen, aka Rusty, who is a RVT and has come to talk to us about a little bit of a sensitive topic. But before we get into that, do you want to introduce yourself and a little bit about your horse background?
Yes, so my name is Kristen or Rusty. I go by both. I am 39. I got my first horse when I was 23. I've been a licensed RVT for 12 years. I work in soon to be 15 states with over 5,000 horses a year. So not only do I put my hands on over 5,000 horses a year, I also see hundreds, if not thousands, of other horses in my travels. And I have a
Awesome.
mobile feed cleaning unit, so that's always fun.
So I've invited you on to talk about horse slaughter
Yes,
because I think that we have similar opinions and it is a topic that people don't like to talk about.
that is true, and it usually causes arguments, but it is something that should be talked about, honestly. It is controversial, and it's funny because a lot of the opposing views come from non equestrians.
Yeah, so just for some background, slaughter in the US is currently illegal. It's been illegal for several years. The last slaughterhouse was closed in May of 2007, and I think it was January of that year that it was legally banned. And I think, I know we both agree that that was the wrong choice, and I think that it has overall led to more issues. But I think a good place to start would be to talk about why it was banned in the first place.
It's funny because slaughter itself was not actually banned. They pulled the funding for the inspectors in the houses, so technically it's still legal. You can butcher a horse for your own consumption, but it's not a common meat here in the United States. So people, I mean, I'm sure there are some that do, but most don't. But when it happened, you started to see an influx of a lot more neglected animals, whether it be barns or fields. And the horses, well, yes, slaughter, just because I am pro slaughter doesn't mean I want to see all the horses shipped to be burger, for lack of better words. But there are things worse than death, and there are more horses experiencing these things that are worse than death because people don't have an easy out like they did before.
Yeah, instead of having a place that you could sell your horse to and that was close enough that your horse isn't traveling for thousands of miles and was receiving a much more humane end. I mean, euthanasia is really expensive. Like
It varies by area, kind of like other services. Like generally, things in California are a lot more expensive than the Midwest. And then I found out through my friends that have heavyweight pulling horses, there are not that many veterinarians in their area of Maine. And the price that they paid for some of the services, I've literally said, like, what? How much? What? But your average euthanasia for your average sized horse, at least in Ohio, you are probably looking at $400 to $600 without haul off or disposal, and you can't bury in most places.
yep, yeah, one of the most common forms of euthanasia is obviously lethal injection, and there are a lot of restrictions about burying a horse that has been subjected to lethal injection because it can poison water supplies and it can poison the land, and it's bad. And there is, like, you can use a biodigester, like there are some areas that have that, but those tend to cost between 25 cents and 75 cents a pound, which when you're talking about a 1,000-pound animal gets really expensive really fast. So then you just have this body that you don't have anything to do with.
Yes, and like here, it depends on how the horse is euthanized. If it's something where they did it via gunshot, which is an acceptable form of euthanasia, per oh, it's the veterinarian thing. I can't get it off the top of my head. But per that, there are vets that carry guns alongside them because sometimes there are situations where you cannot use lethal injection on the horse because they're fractious or it's in a dangerous place or. But to haul one off, you can haul them to the dump. Fun fact, a lot of people don't realize common burial at most vet clinics, they just haul them to the dump. That's all it is, whether it be
Yeah.
dog, cat, horse. But again, you're paying a large fee for that disposal because they are being charged a large fee for the disposal. And that's with lethal injection. You do a gunshot, you can call the renderer, but not everybody has a renderer. You leave it to rot on your property. If you're not on a large property, and I have no problem with that. You have neighbors that are too close, you'll get in trouble for that. It's crazy because you're limited, but it's very expensive.
I mean, I even grew up on a decent sized farm, and we have 2 horses buried there, and we have 2 horses that are going to be buried there when they pass, and that's the space. That's it. That's all we have space for on like a nice big property. So it's hard to dispose of your horse, and there are also a lot of unwanted horses.
We live on 105 acres. But if we use lethal injection and we can't bury it, we can't leave the body out because that's not kind for the scavengers or things that eat carrion. It causes them problems in the long run, and then that leaches into the soil, the topsoil as opposed to 10 feet down. Now, if it is via gunshot, if we had an emergency, yes, we can take the tractor and drag it out for the animals to eat. That doesn't bother us. It bothers some people. Everybody has their preferences. I would have to put it somewhere where I wouldn't look at my horse every day because it would break my heart. But not everybody has that option. We're heavily wooded. I mean, nobody can see me, but you could see me. We're surrounded by forest here. So we
Yeah.
have plenty of places to take them, but not everybody has that option.
Right. Well, and I mean, you mentioned gunshot being an option for euthanasia that opens up your options for disposal. But a lot of people don't want to use a gun because it's really upsetting to watch your horse get shot in the back of the head.
It is. So I actually have skulls that also nobody can see. One of them has a gunshot wound. Her name was Adia. It was an emergency situation. It was a broken leg. So it was wait for the vet that was already tied up and make her suffer or let her go. But it's not something I like to do, but I can do it if there's an emergency. You just kind of have to turn your emotions off and think of your horse's well-being. But
Right.
I don't think it's a good option for people that don't know how to use a firearm either.
No, you're just going to mess it up, and it's going to be more upsetting for everybody.
Yes.
But like thinking specifically about slaughter too, and you made a comment about, people's emotions. And I think that people get their emotions tied up a lot in what is largely a cultural thing. Like, we don't eat horses culturally, and it's not the end all be all of everything. There are plenty of places that eat horses. When we first domesticated horses, we domesticated them to eat them because their meat is like actually quite high in protein, and it's really good for you. And like, I know that I'm going to piss somebody off.
It's generally very lean as well. I have not eaten horse, but my sister has. She went to France and they ate horse. She said it wasn't bad. She said because she didn't grow up with it, it was a flavor that she would have to get used to. But a lot of these people who oppose slaughter, they're not even vegan. They're eating cows. They're eating chickens. They're eating hogs. Some of them eat deer. I mean, we deer hunt, and I'm not picky. I would definitely try horse. But that also doesn't mean I'm going to go out and be like, you know what, crackers, I'm hungry.
Right.
It's your day today. I kind of a little segue. The slaughter pipeline being narrowed to where we have to ship them out, it makes more cruelty in those ways because that's a long drive from most states. But now you have horses that are caught in that auction pipeline where they go from auction to auction to auction to auction to auction via whether it be dealer or the horse was not as described or it was drugged, and it just gets thrown right back into that pipeline, which creates cruelty there as well. There are some horses, they're counterfeit. You can't fix everything.
Right.
And you're putting people at danger, other horses. It's crazy. Not everything's fixable. Not everything's right. Not everything's sweet and peaceful. And a lot of people don't realize while they're herbivores, your average horse is 1,000 pounds. That's half a ton. And they can kill you on accident.
Yeah, and that, I mean, like, that pipeline also has a lot of exploitation in it, and there's a lot of people who play on people's emotions and who raise a ton of money that they don't actually use to, quote, bail out that horse. I hate seeing bailout posts. It drives me up a wall because it's not.
And I get into heat with a lot of that because we educated people about that. My wife and I have been around since the Voice for Horses and stuff in the early 2000s. I invite people, do you want to rescue, or which I consider it purchasing, but if you want to call it rescue, that's fine. You want to go to an auction and rescue a horse. Go with an experienced horse person to the auction and bid directly. So let's say we'll use Preacher, for example. He didn't go through the auction, but we'll use him. Let's say I bought him at the auction and he was $1,200. It's better than somebody else getting a hold of them and buying him for that $1,200 and being like, we need $2,500 to keep him off the truck, even though he's not getting on the truck. They're making I mean, people are free to do what they will, but you are lining somebody's pockets if you don't go get directly or get from a rescue who gets directly from the auction, who does put the veterinary care, the refeeding programs, feet, vaccines, all that fun stuff. Well, yeah, it's going to cost a little more because they put all this money into this animal, but it's not just a quick flip. And most of those horses they claim are going on the kill truck. They don't take skinny horses unless they're desperate, because for every skinny horse, you got 3 or 4 fat ones
Mhm.
that can fill that space on the truck. It's wild.
I mean, yeah, that's like across all pets that we have. Obesity is the most common form of neglect. Like they're not wanting for some chunk.
No. And it's sad because a lot of people don't realize, let's say skinny standard bred went through for $200 and the dealer or the buyer bought it. They're going to be like, even though they're not shipping this horse, they're not going to ship that horse. It's a waste of money for them to ship that horse. They're going to be like, oh, $3,000 to keep him off the truck. And then somebody's going to end up with this skinny standard bred. But what they don't know is horses they didn't advertise as being loaded on the truck. They paid $3,000 for that freaking skinny standard bred by pulling at heartstrings. Well, there's about 5 or 6 fat, healthy horses that ran feral through the sale that are going on that truck anyway. You just don't see them. You essentially send more horses to slaughter if you're against it by paying those raised fees. It's a robbery is what it is. And then you have more blood on your hands in the end, because for every horse you're having 2, 3, 4, 5, horses going in that horse's stead that you will never know their face, nothing.
It is estimated that there are about 36,000 horses shipped to Mexico and Canada each year. And I found another estimate that it costs rescues about $2,300 per year per horse. So to put that into perspective, if they were to bail out all of those horses at cost and take them home, that would be an additional $82.8 million burden.
And the sad thing is, some of those horses that run through, they need euthanasia. They need euthanasia. And there's nothing, before anybody gets upset, there's nothing wrong with having a pasture pet. I potentially have a pasture pet due to a PSSM1 diagnosis if we can't get it figured out. I have the money to keep her here and she can be a pasture pet, but most people that have horses don't want a pasture pet. They want something semi-usable. Nobody wants these, 36,000 36,000 head of horses. Where are they going to go?
And you hit on something really important, which is money. My family still owns the farm that I grew up on. If my horse that I have now were to be in a situation where he was no longer usable, he could retire there and he would be safe for the rest of his life. And that would be great. That's what I would do. If I didn't have that, I wouldn't be able to keep him if he wasn't usable anymore. Like, if he was sucking money, if he got sick, I would have to make a really hard choice. And I wouldn't choose slaughter, but again, it should be an option because that is a way that you can be paid for your animal instead of paying hundreds or thousands of dollars that you might not have.
Exactly. Like, I'm not going, unless something showed up here that was dangerous, I'm not going to send it to the slaughter pipeline via auction. Now, have I sold horses at auction? Absolutely. But if somebody's paying X amount, it's these $3,000 horses that they're asking money for are not going to slaughter. Like, that's not how it works. I have the choice to no sale. Now, let's say I get the most dangerous, rank, nasty, been to dozens of trainers, can't be fixed, and it shows up at my house. I'm going to send it there. I'm going to put it in the loose pen, and I'm going to put a note on my paperwork: no private homes, dangerous, blah, and the people that most people demonize, instead of the people taking these horses to auction, they demonize the owners of the auction houses, which is really goofy because they're not the ones that bred them. They're not the ones that didn't handle them. They're not the ones that let these injuries go till these horses. Most of those horses, the best meal they get is while they're in those holding pens.
If you have an unwanted horse, it's gonna get neglected. That it's gonna sit in a field. At the best case scenario, it's gonna sit in a field and not have its feet taken care of and not have its veterinary needs met and like not have its food needs met, or founder because it's on green grass or whatever. And
Yeah.
that's
And
worse.
people argue, well, it's nicer than dying. I'm going to tell you, I remember, and I think I told you possibly about this horse back in the Another Chance for Horses and the Voice for Horses days, back in the early 2000s. There was a Grulia mare named Faith. And Faith went through the auction as quote unquote, or well, through this kill pen scheme as, oh, she's just lame. The person who paid this inflated amount for this lame horse gets her home and her coffin bones are falling through the soles of her feet and they have to put her down. While that horse deserved humane euthanasia, it would have been kinder to ship her directly to her end than make her stay in quarantine and then with obviously no vet care, because a vet's going to pick up a foot and be like, oh, this horse needs, I recommend this horse needs put down. They can't force anybody, but they can recommend it. And then get shipped to this woman's house instead of the closest slaughter facility because whoever had her didn't humanely euthanize her. What's more cruel, making her jump through all those hoops with her coffin bones falling through her foot, or sending her directly to where she's going to, at least in Canada, and when we had it here, a captive bolt gun and lights out, no more pain? It's not pretty, but it's the kinder option. I remember that mare. That broke my heart. I mean, and I was in my late teens, early 20s.
I think some people have not had the experience. I don't want to say fortune or misfortune, but have not had the experience of seeing a horse that needs to be put down. And it changes you. Like when you see a horse that is so obviously in pain and like just should not be here anymore, there are some fundamental changes that happen, and it's kind of a wake-up call. I think that a lot of people don't think about the end of life when they buy a horse, which is unfortunate because you need to.
When we bought the mule, Preacher, he didn't even have a name, but he was in rough shape and we rehabbed him. We did a slow refeeding program so he didn't get refeeding syndrome. And a lot of people aren't educated in that and ended up hurting more horses, than helping. And he kind of plateaued in his weight. And that is when we had the vet out. We found out he had raging Lyme disease. He was not only chronic, he was having a flare up, but we did have a backup plan. So it was 30 days of minocycline initially. It was very expensive because he's a very big mule. And I told my wife, if we have to do another month, great. But if he's not getting better after 60 days of antibiotics, we're going to have him put down. I said, it's going to suck because I love that mule, but we're going to have him put down. And we actually bought him from a dealer who said, thank goodness you guys got him because we never would have thought about testing for Lyme disease. Mm-hmm. But what if he would have went to somebody that wasn't experienced, they might have had good intentions, but he could have suffered in the hands of even, the most well-intentioned person.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it's great. It's amazing when horses land in a lucky spot and they get a second chance on life. Absolutely. That's what I would prefer for every animal. For dogs and cats and horses and whatever, we don't have 36,000 homes for those animals.
No. And a majority of these people, yes, there are horse people that oppose slaughter. And I mean, it's fine and dandy. It's an opinion. But even these horse people aren't filling their pastures with these horses that nobody wants. But a majority of the people are people that they may love horses and have good intentions for the horses, but they know nothing about horses. When you see those kill pen scams, the mass bailouts, who are the people sending them the most money? Usually older, well-off women that
Mhm.
think ponies are pretty, but they don't even know how to put a halter on. And I'm not
Right.
going to demonize them for having those good intentions, but those same, in a majority of it is women, they won't listen to, hey, you want me to go save some auction horses? I'll go and you can pay instead of like, 2,500 a head. I can get these things for between one and $1,000 or $100 and $1,000. And then you have more money for the vet bills that they're probably going to need at the very least, their teeth floated vaccines in a farrier. But that big cycle, it hurts more horses than it helps.
100% it does. And again, like, I don't know, people get really mad about the word slaughter because the thought of eating a horse for a lot of Americans is like, that's crazy. But if we even go back to why humans stopped eating horses in the first place, it was because of religion. And the religions that stopped the eating of horses were religions that received monetary gain from their followers. And they learned that horses are worth more in the field than they are on your plate. So they stopped the eating of horses so that way they could get, higher
Yield.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you get more yield out of a cow than you do a horse.
Right.
But our horses here, for the most part, are vastly different from places that raise horses for slaughter. In the UK, so here we pay what, 10, 20, 30 plus $1,000 for a nice gypsy cob. Those are meat horses in the UK.
Mhm.
They're a dime a dozen in the UK. I don't know how many of my UK friends are like, "Hey, saw this, this cob. Why is it $45,000? I get one here, for pennies on that dollar." And I'm like, because they're not as common here,
Yep.
so they're a rarity. So they pay more, and they're just like, "We eat those." I'm like, I know.
It's also really interesting because in the UK and in France, there are a lot of riding horses. People ride horses over there, and they still have slaughter. Like, it's not like one of the arguments here is that they're pets, and like that's true, and it's true other places that still are okay with slaughter because it's just cultural.
A lot of the neglect does come from our very lax livestock laws because now I am a firm believer horses are livestock. Are they also companions? Absolutely they are. But they are livestock, so they are governed by those livestock rules. In most places, because I've worked for the Humane Society, let's say I got a field of skinny horses out there. If I have moldy, gross cow hay out there, dirty water, and a or a sapling sticking out of the ground, they consider that food, water, and shelter because they're livestock. I think if they did something, I don't think it should be completely overhauled because they're still livestock, but made some more specific things that applied to horses. Some of that neglect would dissipate, but there is always going to be ignorance and then bad people that cause horses and anything else for that matter to be in a bad way.
Which is unfortunate. Like, I think this is why people don't like having this conversation, is because it's not a fun conversation to have.
It's really not. I have cried over horses that I just met at the auction. Before we moved to this beautiful place, there were two gray Percheron mares, most likely sisters or half sisters, smooth mouthed. One of them needed an eyeball removed, but they were very gentle, very sweet. If we had had this place, I would have had a pair of Percheron sisters that didn't need to go through that auction. I'm not saying that all of the horses that go to slaughter deserve it. There are good ones. There are a lot of good ones, but we don't have the space. We don't have enough experienced horse people to keep them. I was asked by somebody who has one of these janky ass rescues, well, you have 105 acres. Why don't you have more horses? I'm not going to deplete this beautiful property with horses because horses are also really bad for the environment as far as tearing up the natural land and eating things that, yeah, it's a whole mess. Like, they're invasive. That's fine though. We keep them in fences, but I'm not going to deplete my property of its natural resources and the ability to sustain itself because somebody else bred a bunch of horses that I had nothing to do with.
I mean, it's like dogs. There are lots of stray dogs in this world, and you don't need to fill your house with dogs for somebody else's mistake. Like, that's not the solution.
Yeah, that goes into that, like, adopt, don't shop. But then dog rescues do the same thing. They'll have this dog that's bit like 19 people that's been in the shelter taking up resources for 5 years, but they let, Scruffy fall through the cracks. That was actually a good dog that they could have placed quickly. And a lot of these big rescues are hoarding situations like that. Like, here's Buckshot. He's killed 3 grown men, and you can't have a saddle on him, and he's got 4 teeth. Why is that taking the room of, a younger sound horse that might need a little bit of training, but you didn't pick it up because his ribs weren't showing?
Yep.
Like, people are goofy.
As we wrap up, my last question, this is like a really interesting one considering the conversation we had, but based on our conversation, what advice would you want to give someone?
Like, as far as slaughter itself, or
However you want to take that.
if you're an inexperienced person wanting to save or purchase some of these horses from the auction, I implore you to find a local horse person that knows what they're doing, because they're probably going to keep you from getting hurt because your heartstrings are going to be in the way of that purchase. And if not, please go to a reputable rescue like New Vocations that takes these horses and puts the time into them. And I'm sure there's other breed specific rescues like Gentle Giants Draft Rescue and so on and so forth. Go take a horse out of a rescue that has been evaluated and ridden, and they know everything they can know about it, to make space for those experienced horse people to go get another deserving horse out of that situation. That's my biggest thing, because I see so many green owners get hurt.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for your time. I feel like this is a great conversation. And I'm interested to see what comes from it.
I can't wait.
All right. Talk to you later. Thank you for joining us this week at the Horse Girl Gazetteer. You can find us online at Horse Girl Gazetteer on Facebook or Instagram, and Horse Girl Gazette on TikTok and Patreon. You can also email us questions or comments at horsegirlgazetteer@gmail.com. If you find yourself enjoying our content, please leave us a review and share the link with your friends to help others find their way here. Any and all support is greatly appreciated. Talk to you later.